to be on the lockdown. But again, we are going to have to come out of lockdown. There's going to be a trade-off between the economy and future deaths. That's what the effect of the economy going down does have, and current deaths now. Well, let's talk about all of that with our next guest. She's Conservative MP. She's also former Cabinet Minister of the Conservative Party. Specifically, she was Business Secretary. That's Andrea Leadsom. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Now, there's a very difficult conversation going on, I think, within the country, within the government, within politics, and I think just it would be happening in pubs, but it's happening in people's homes and on Zoom accounts now about at what point it's going to be safe for us to exit the lockdown. The government has said repeatedly they're following the science, they're following the medical advice, and they're not going to come out of lockdown unless or until it is safe to do so. We can avoid a second spike. But what do you want to hear from the government, particularly from Boris Johnson, as he's back at work today, in terms of how we are going to go about, and hopefully when we're going to go about, getting our economy back on track and getting everyone back out of their homes and back to work?
The first thing has to be to avoid a second spike. I mean, there's no doubt, having had this lockdown, it's done a huge amount of harm to the economy. And the worst thing possible would be if we came out of it too soon, or if we all sort of took matters into our own hands and did whatever we felt like, and then we ended up with a second spike. That would be disastrous for business confidence, let alone for the appalling consequences on people's lives and loved ones and so on. So we've got to avoid that second spike. The government's absolutely right to set out that term under which we can start to consider lifting the lockdown restrictions. But then actually what we really need to do is to ensure that businesses get a bit of notice before the lockdown is lifted. Because, for example, Julia, if you're a restaurant, you need to get your supplies back in line. You've got to get cleaners for your restaurant because it's been shut for a few weeks. You need your waiting staff, your chefs, the people to write the menu. And, of course, critically, you need customers. So your whole supply chain and then your whole business model can't just be restarted overnight. And that's going to be the big challenge. If you take a gym, you might be able to restart quite quickly. But on the other hand, you'll need proper guidelines around social distancing. How far apart do your running machines need to be and that kind of thing. So actually lifting the lockdown is going to be complicated. And by the same token as we all went into it together, we all need to come out of it together based on the best scientific and medical advice.
But the key for you then is people getting notice, trying to work out what they can do, perhaps any works they can do to their the property, whether it is a factory or a shop floor, to make it feasible for them to maintain social distancing. Do you think it's going to the message from the government seems to be we don't want to have mixed messaging. That's what they've said. We don't want to have a situation where we're telling people you need to stay at home and then saying, oh, but in a couple of weeks' time you'll be able to go and do this and do that and go back to work and back on the train. Do you understand why they are wary of giving out a confused message at such a crucial time as we're just sort of heading down from that peak that we've seen in the last few weeks in terms of infections and deaths? Or do you think that actually this is, as Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, has hinted, this is just not treating the general public as the adults we are, and that we are capable of understanding we are going to be able to do this in a few weeks, but we can't do it now?
It is definitely the case that we must avoid mixed messages. The reality is, if you start saying, oh, well, in a couple of weeks it'll all be fine, people do start to think, right, well, I'll just get ahead of that. And so we've got to, all of us, stick with this idea that by staying at home and saving lives, protecting the NHS, we are actually squashing that spike in the virus spreading. And in doing that, we're making sure that each one of us that gets it is infecting less than one other person. That's the kind of magic that means that actually it is back under control. And it's only at that point, and that point is possibly emerging, but not definitely emerging. So we've got to give it the chance to do the job properly. And as I said at the start, the worst thing of all would be to have a second spike where we ended up back where we started with more deaths, with another peak in the virus spreading, and where the economy had to lock down again. So it's definitely worth sticking with it for the next couple of weeks, and then the government providing very clear guidelines per business type and per business and per type of resident in our population, so that we're all totally clear about what needs to happen next. I mean, it really is a national effort. It's not about are you treating people as adults or not. It's actually about making sure that that national effort sticks together and that people don't just kind of go off and do their own thing.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly that is the case, although there is some evidence, isn't there, that people are starting to go off and do their own thing. More people out and about at the weekend, and again, partly the nice weather. We may see, with rain coming for large parts of the country in the coming weeks, that we don't see that so much, but more businesses reopening, people sort of taking it into their own hands to restart. But the crucial thing here is there is this balance, and we were constantly told it's balance between saving lives and saving the economy. But it's not that simple, is it? Saving the economy will also save lives. And there's a lot of concern that all of this focus on coronavirus, as absolutely as much as we all support it, look, we want to save lives, it's a success that, NHS Nightingale hospitals are completely empty. That is a success, not a failure. But if it is the case that we are basically completely damaging our economy beyond all possible sort of, help, we are going to see a downturn for many years to come. We're going to see austerity. We're going to see less money to spend on our healthcare. We're seeing children missing schools there, and the mental health problems that many people will be having from the lockdown. We may well see, as lots of evidence, more deaths as a result of the lockdown than as a result of coronavirus. And there must be perhaps a balance that we can reach where we can minimise both risks.
That was exactly what the government was saying at the start of this, where in the media there were calls for lockdown now, you've left it too late, blah, blah, blah. And at the time, I recall quite clearly Boris saying, we can't lock down too early. It's very difficult to keep to that for a lengthy period of time. It needs to be done just at the right moment. And now, of course, as you rightly point out, we are seeing that the consequences of the lockdown itself on people's mental health, on our economy, on businesses and so on, also has a very serious consequence. So you do have to decide, and ultimately it is about saving lives. It is about prioritising people's physical health from this absolutely terrifying virus. And at the point that that's under control, we then, yes, definitely need to focus on restoring our economy back to health. And I actually think that the Office for Budget Responsibility's assessment of it could well be about right. We will see a massive drop in our economy in Q2 this year, but then we'll also see a big bounce back, because there's no doubt people do have the desire to get back out there and start to get on with their lives. Businesses, I mean, every single day I'm getting loads of emails from local businesses saying, what can I do? How can I restart? How can I work under lockdown conditions and so on? People really do want to get stuck back in. So I think we will see a bounce. And what we need to do is to have that bounce at a time where there isn't the risk of a second peak. So I think we're still in the right position. We need to carry on with the lockdown, and then we need to start preparing. The government needs to be preparing very clear messaging for businesses and people on how we get out of this.
Okay, let me ask you also finally about this ongoing fuss being made about Dominic Cummings attending these SAGE meetings. These meetings, of course, are the scientific advice group led by our senior medics and scientists in the country advising the government. There's been some uproar in some sections of the media that the Prime Minister's senior advisor has been attending those meetings. Is there an issue, do you think, is it about him attending those meetings, or do you think that the anger over this, the concern over this, is motivated by the fact that Dominic Cummings is the man who delivered Brexit?
It's just such a non-story. I just am amazed that anybody would think it was an unreasonable thing. Special advisors are there to attend meetings, to take away critical points, to provide some qualitative analysis, and then to feed it back to ministers. Nobody is suggesting or pretending that Dom Cummings is somehow masquerading as a virus expert or something. He is merely attending a meeting on behalf of the minister he works for, the Prime Minister, as special advisors do always. So I just literally do not get why this has become such a big discussion. And so, yes, I mean, in answer to your question, is it because people don't like him because of Brexit? That may well be it. It's certainly got nothing to do with the day job. His job is to analyse important meetings and feed back to the Prime Minister with the best advice he can give him.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Andrea Leadsom, Conservative MP, former Business Secretary, of course, as well. Coming up, we are going to be talking to